Welcome back to Let's Talk Tax, the show for growth-minded CPAs and real estate pros in tax. I'm TJ Sponsel. Today's episode tackles a big question. Why are so many CPAs still hesitant when it comes to location advisory services and economic development incentives? To unpack this, I'm joined by Ben Worrell, who leads the firm's location advisory services practice. We're diving into the most common barriers CPAs face, from confusion around timing and uncertainty about fee structures, to misconceptions that these services are only for Fortune 500 companies. Whether you're a CPA unsure when to bring this up with your client, or a business owner wondering what incentives might be on the table, this episode is full of practical insights and a few myths where we're ready to bust. So let's get to it. Ben, welcome.
Thank you.
Ben and I have had talked a lot about this subject over the years. Just to give it our listeners feedback, we introduced this service back in 2014, and it's a very valuable program for clients of all shapes and sizes. But I think it's so speculative, and there's so many myths associated with it that it can be somewhat intimidating to tackle. And so I appreciate now we get to make this official on our Let's Talk Tax platform to see really and help give CPAs and their clients some insights into how we make this less complicated and how we really implement this strategy that ultimately is going to bring them benefits.
And one of those things that you and I have talked about a couple of times is it seems like it's done behind a curtain, behind closed doors. The black box has been terminology around that. So hopefully this opportunity will allow us to demyth that a little bit.
Well, I think as a good intro point would be just why don't we give a 10,000 view of what are location advisory services? What kind of planning options are there available to clients?
Absolutely. We like to look at it from more of a strategic standpoint. So this is future growth planning at the end of the day. If we're working with clients, if that trusted advisor is working with their clients and saying, okay, not only what did you do last year and what's the best tax plan for that year and that tax filing, if we start to pivot that just a little bit and start to say, okay, what could happen next year? That's the term that oftentimes can scare people because that's prospective, that's unknown, that's uncertainty that's out there. We know that our CPA partners like working with what is known, but we can really unlock a lot of potential opportunity, a lot of potential value for clients when we start thinking about that more strategic, growth-minded element. And when a CPA partner brings that to the table, that can just really enhance that relationship with their client.
What I often see is that we have these great conversations. People love to talk about their growth goals, and the aspirations they have. But to us to do our jobs and to be able to advocate for them, we've got to put these ideas on paper. And I think that's also that can be, I used the term earlier, it's intimidating for them. Okay, now it feels real, and it can be very, very scary. So with that, why do you think CPAs are often hesitant about engaging in these conversations for their clients?
Yeah, it's that unknown element that's out there in the future. Well, what if we don't hit those types of things? Is there some sort of penalty? Is there some sort of clawback, is a term in the industry that we're always watching for? So I think because there is that inherent risk, much like our banking partners that are out there when they're looking at this and saying, gosh, is this going to pencil and then does it work moving forward from here? There's inherent risk involved with that. Now, the nice part about that growth is that your business owners are also thinking about the risk that's involved to them. Hey, I'm about ready to take out a pretty large loan here to do that expansion or to hire these additional employees, get some more working capital in here. Is it going to pay off at the end of the day? We look at the incentives as an opportunity to help offset some of that risk by that performance over time. New jobs, new investment, those are the two things we're looking for.
I know we had actually just before this, we had a call with a prospective client in Colorado. What kind of flexibility do businesses typically have? I think when we talk about job growth and you're making estimate of how many jobs you're going to add and the salaries, but it's not so much of, okay, I got to add this many jobs by the end of 2025. We're sitting here in June of 2025. How many jobs do I have to add? What typically is that window of time that they have to fulfill those job pledges?
That's a great question because I think one of the hesitations about location advisory is that, well, how do I predict the future 5-10 years out? I can't do that. Nobody knows. No one could have predicted COVID in the year before when it happened. So I think there's hesitancy around that. So I try to encourage clients to say, look, we get it too. If we all had that crystal ball, we'd be making money with it somewhere. We wouldn't be doing what we're doing right now. So let's look out just over the next 12 to 24 months and see what that picture could look like. Because a lot of your business owners out there are going to have an idea of what that 3-year plan is into the future. We're right now working through our 2030 vision. So, how does that look over the next 5 years? That's stretching out pretty far into the future. So let's try to keep that pretty tight and just say, what happened last year? Let's look at the data that we do have. What happened last year if you're an existing company? Do we see that repeating itself again? If not, what does the growth plan look like? If you've got a particular contract that's out there, you're saying, hey, if we get that contract, we're going to bring on an additional piece of equipment. I've got to staff that equipment now to be able to help move that product forward. Okay, what does that look like from a job creation goal? Do you add salespeople to that? Do you have to add additional C-suite staff? Do you have to have additional administrative staff? What about drivers? All those features come together, and it's our goal inside that initial conversation to really start to unpack that and say, okay, let's paint this picture in the best way that we can, understanding we're going to have a little bit of fuzziness to it because we're dealing with the future.
You go out and we work with a client. Okay, and let's call it Worrell Manufacturing. Okay, and Worrell Manufacturing is looking at being in the Midwest. We choose a site, and let's call it Northwestern Ohio. Let's just pick a site. And they pledge 50 jobs over the next 5 years. But something happens, and they only fulfill 38 of the 50 jobs.
Yep.
Is there a penalty to them?
In some states, there may be. Again, if you've put a threshold that's out there and if the state preloads some of those incentives, it's rarer today. Most states are going to be performance-based. So in that example, we've got a lofty goal of about 50 to get there, but we're going to get benefit because of the net new jobs that we do actually create. So even if we only create 35 jobs, there's still benefit created as a result of those jobs, and you can still realize some of that. Okay. The only reason it may hinder you is if you plan out too far in the future and you're not going to hit that goal, it may limit you on what you could do from a phase 2 standpoint. So let's say we go back and in that same example that we have there, now we need to expand the building that we just put inside that Northwest Ohio location. We may be limited because we've still got some of those expectations on the job side. So again, that's just part of that strategic conversation where we say, what's the optimistic goal? What's the conservative goal? And then maybe in the middle is a realistic goal. And we try to go with that more realistic goal in most cases.
Given our reach, 5 offices across the country, what do you typically set as the expectation? I think sometimes, when we talk about our other service lines, it's very easy for us to apply an approximate value to the tax benefit. In this world, this location advisory world, I look at my total invested dollar. Let's say I project I'm going to have $5 million of investment or $10 million of investment over the next 5 or 6 years between property, plant, people, and equipment. What's a good rule of thumb in terms of the total benefit value based on that investment?
We tend to go conservative on that value just because we want to help shape expectations appropriately. So I like to say with that investment number, between 5 and 10% of the investment value is typically what you can see and realize from incentives over a period of time. That period of time can be between 5 and 10 years. So in the example, if we have a $10 million investment, $1 million in incentive benefit is not unattainable. There's a lot of programs that help with that. We're looking into various areas of tax, be that property tax, be that a wage withholding tax that you now get back as a credit. Sometimes it's training grants that are out there. All those employees you now have to bring on board, you have to bring them up to speed on what your particular operation is, what that particular piece of equipment is that you're now bringing into that investment, that new location. The training costs that are associated with that's either in-house on the job training, or you may have to go through a third-party group, a community college that's in the area. How do we help offset some of those costs? There's a lot of programs that go unrealized that can bring tremendous value to those clients.
And I'm just thinking about through the years some of the impediments or some of the myths that have been associated behind chasing a location advisory or engaging us to work on a client's behalf for location advisory services. Does pursuing state and local incentives slow down the progress of the project?
It's a good question. Now, we have to be in front of those final decisions. And that's probably the hardest part and the part that creates the most difficulties is simply from a timing perspective. If you make a commitment towards a particular location or you've already hired the jobs, if you think about it from the state or the local official, it's an incentive to do those things. If you've already done it, why do I need to incentivize it to happen? Because it's already here. Again, we're looking at the tax picture from that point of view. So if you've got new jobs that you're creating, there's wage withholding that now flows through to the state and or local community. They want to incentivize more of that to happen. So if you've got those growth plans, being in front of that's really important. I like to say it takes about 60 to 90 days to be able to go through the application, negotiation, and documentation process, 3 kind of various steps along the way to qualify for those incentives. So in most cases, if we can have that much time in front of those final decisions, which if you think about it, that usually is going to align with a lot of your due diligence also. Mm-hmm. If you've already identified a site that's out there, but it's not been made public yet, that's still an opportunity for us to come in and say, okay, during that due diligence process to make sure that this is the actual site you want to go in, let's get this incentive process kicked off.
And for some states, they can be very quick on making a verbal offer, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, because I know that's what we run into. Like, for example, Indiana is been pretty dynamic about that.
Yeah.
Other states have a much more formal process that is much more wait and see approach. And we won't name those states right now.
That's
but
right.
They're out there. What would you say right now? Is there any states that are really, really hot? Obviously, I go back 20. I was just talking about this yesterday with someone. I remember 20 years ago when Mitch Daniels got elected to the state of Indiana, and he got really, really serious about economic development. Are there any states right now that have not typically been very hot on incentives, and now they've joined the party and maybe have changed their tune?
That's a great question. Yeah, I would say the Midwest and the Southeast are very hot right now. A lot of activity, a lot of development activities. Infrastructure has always been good there. The workforce and work ethic inside of those states has always been really, really good. So a lot of companies are migrating to those areas and setting up new operations inside of it. So oftentimes you'll see states when one state really starts to succeed in economic development initiatives that are out there, and that's driven by the governor, that's driven by state legislatures. When you start to see that being really effective, other states will now start to follow suit. So one of the things we take a look at is that there's a kind of a regional effect. So you'll see similar programs reflected from one state over into another when they see the value of those programs really taking off. So Midwest and Southeast have been really hot. Texas has always been a market that's just it's booming. It's always been growing. You gotta go big in Texas. Arizona's been stepping up too, and they've got a lot of initiatives, especially as you see some of that migration out of West Coast states, let's call it, into some other areas.
Sure. Traditionally, you've said that industries that states don't have much appetite for are hospitality, retail, restaurants. Is that still the case?
Yeah, it's still the case on the retail side in particular, though I always like to say there's a little asterisk behind everything that we say with economic development. Because if you have a large commercial development, that could be a major investment. So a $25 million new commercial center that may have various outlets that are there. So the individual Burger King or the Gap store that's going in, they may not be receiving incentives directly, but the development of that whole space is a tremendous boon to the community that it's going into. The other side that we're starting to see some turnover in is on the housing side, because a lot of the focus always for economic development has been manufacturing. Everyone likes having those widgets. They get stamped with the name of the community. It goes out that door, and it helps to just market that community towards others wherever that widget's ending up. However, you got to have people there, and that's been a new phenomenon, especially post-COVID, where companies are saying, where are the people? Where's the talent? People are choosing, because of the COVID, because they could work from home, they're choosing where they want to live first, and then they'll be able to find a job associated with that. Now, we're starting to see a little bit of that changing, but companies are also saying, I need to go where that talent is. I need to go where the people are. And so housing, to try to attract those folks to live in a community, have the quality of life features associated with that, all of those are really, really important. So it's a multifaceted conversation, but retail has traditionally not been a good opportunity. Single-family housing is not usually a good opportunity. Outside of that, though, there's a lot of opportunity for companies.
Let's kind of move on to the fees. I think that's something that, since 2007, McGuire Sponsel has been primarily focused on serving CPA firms. And over the years, we've added commercial brokers and bankers, and we've had many, hundreds of successful relationships. But contingency fees has kind of been the standard, if you will, with location advisory. And I think that is somewhat taboo within the CPA industry.
Yeah.
Can you explain McGuire Sponsel, what we're doing differently in that area? Because I feel like we've been able to pivot to align well with the preferences of our CPA partners.
Absolutely. So this has been a strategic conversation you and I have been having here, even just recently, but before that in the past. We try to serve the client at the end of the day. We want it to be the best case scenario for the client. And we want the CPA partner to be seen as the hero that's bringing these strategic growth-minded initiatives to their clients. And so we're always going to defer to the CPA partners to say, this is your client. How do we serve them in the best way possible? Now, I'll say most clients prefer that contingency fee basis because it de-risks the situation for them. There's no payment unless they actually see a benefit from the program. So that makes a lot of sense. If you're the CEO sitting across there, yeah, sure, that makes a lot of sense to me. I understand, though, that the CPAs often have to have that independence, especially on the audit side, and so the contingency fee can be a little bit of a hesitation point, as you stated beforehand. So we can have a milestone basis. We could have a flat fee basis that's out there. Again, our goal is to serve the client at the end of the day, make sure they're maximizing that incentive value by not only applying for the incentives, but also realizing the incentives. And the only way that that's done is through compliance reporting year over year into the future. Again, that's a part that our team takes off the plate of the client, takes off the plate of the CPA, but we're also trying to match that up to make sure that that tax benefit, that incentive at the end of the day, that the CPA is looking at and saying, yes, that's going to be beneficial to you, Mr. CEO, Ms. CEO, that you're going to be able to utilize moving forward. It's not going to have, 7 years from now, we'll be able to finally utilize that.
Over the recent years, we felt that we are missing the boat a little bit with our CPA partners. They've gravitated towards cost segregation, towards our transfer pricing, towards R&D studies, towards 174 analysis. And I understand that. This is uniquely different than most of the other things we do. But if you look at the dollars that a location advisory project generates in the form of tax savings and grants and other things for our clients, it can dwarf the benefits that a cost segregation study provides.
Absolutely.
One thing, there's a couple points that I wanted to make. The first one is, why don't you explain, because I think we've also been in front of clients before and CPAs go, I've tried to do that before, I never got a dime. Can you walk them through the compliance piece and the reporting piece and how we support clients with compliance?
Absolutely. And I've got such a great team associated with me that helps with all of this. And it really comes down to, do you know what the deadlines are? Do you know what the requirements are? And can you get submitted in a timely fashion? Much like just about everything else we do in relation to tax. Having someone, though, that's there to help monitor that, to stay in front of all of that. We know that controllers change, CFOs change. So what we set out to do from the outset, the individual that may have been that main contact to start with may no longer be with that company. And so and we've seen this multiple times, if companies go forward with a state, with a local group, and they've got this arrangement signed up, but then they leave, those emails are going through as the reminder to that person that's no longer there, and they may get missed. That's a major element of why a lot of companies just don't realize that benefit. They also just don't even know that the compliance process works that way, or they may think, oh, well, the economic development team that was very helpful and very friendly up front, and they're great teams that are out there, don't they do that for me because they help me settle this stuff up? And the answer is, in most cases, no. It's on the company to do. So just to have another partner that's out there, our team helps support that. Again, takes it off the plate so people don't have to worry about it. There's still data we've got to collect. We've still got to submit information, documentation on that, but we can help just alleviate that concern.
So to recap, we've kind of gone over the opportunity, okay? And the importance of leverage, the fact that there is a lot of states that have an appetite for supporting business investment. We've explained how we come alongside with reporting after we procure it and after they start hiring the jobs, how we support compliance through the reporting mechanisms. We've talked about the fee structure and how we can approach this not from a contingency fee base, but more of maybe a milestone or flat fee. And I think as a rule of thumb, what you and I have talked about before is that, okay, so you have about 5 to 10% of your invested value is the ultimate benefits.
Yep.
And I would say probably most of our engagement fees fall on that 10 to 20% of whatever the benefits are.
Yep.
Okay, so if I invest $20 million, okay, in something, in property, plant, people, and equipment over a 5-year period, let's say, and my tax benefits are going to be $1 million to $2 million, okay, and then my engagement fees, okay, are going to be, let's call it maybe $200,000 to $400,000.
Yep.
So on an investment like that, I'm getting a couple $1 million back, and my cost benefit ratios, let's call it 1 to 10. That's pretty good value.
I'd make that bet because again, it's betting on if I bring you $100, you can pay me 15 of that, and you'll keep the 85, right?
Okay,
makes a lot of sense.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
So I'm teeing this up. I'm building up this, Ben. The most intimidating thing is, how do we go down putting this to paper? I understand the theory. I understand the concept. Yes, it all makes sense. McGuire Sponsel's wonderful. They're going to support me. But at the end of the day, I've got to put this plan to paper. And I've got to be able to turn this theory into application by sitting down and actually drawing out or laying out when I'm going to make these hires, what the dollar amounts these hires are going to be, when the investment. Can you talk about how we support clients during that estimate, what I call projection period, of us taking and really working with the clients and helping put this idea to paper so we can sit down and start talking to speculate what this means and have conversations with the applicable economic development people.
And that's where, again, I'll get back to what we talked about originally of the strategic growth conversation. We're trying to map that out in that initial call. That's why I love being on the call with the CPA, with the client, so we can really strategize at that point in time. Let's talk through what this looks like, the growth into the future. Our team goes through kind of 5 basic things on every initial call. Location, where's this happening at? The timing, what I mentioned before, and are we still in front of the project and by how far? Again, we don't want to slow down that process, so how soon do you need to make? Is it next week, next month, next year? The earlier we can be in that process, the better, so that we can maximize those incentives. The industry type, what are you doing with this particular location? You may be a manufacturer, but this next location may be a distribution center to just get your product closer to the end one. So that's important to know. And then finally, it's the 2 things that are always key to economic credits and incentives: net new jobs and net new investment, capital expenditures at the end of the day, machinery, equipment, plant, that kind of stuff. We'll establish all of those things early on in that call, and then it's, again, our job to help document that out for the client and then share that back and say, is this really, did we capture the value of what you're looking at here? I know it's so difficult to hand a blank piece of paper there and say, if you can just fill this out, it'd be great for us. But if we can pre-fill that out and you go through there and say, yeah, that looks about right, I think I'm comfortable with us moving forward from there on that. Great. We've helped save a couple of steps, some hesitancy, maybe some concerns along the way, to say, well, based on this information, here's what we think that value could be. Does that make sense for us to move forward? In most cases, the answer is yes.
Okay. Well, and our ultimate goal, I look at so many things we do as a firm that the client looks, or the prospect at the time looks at you and goes, well, why wouldn't I do this? And that's
I like having that conversation.
Exactly. And that's what we want. We want that question at the end of that process. Yep. Because we have so much respect for CPA firms, brokerages, and bankers with the relationships they have with their clients. That's what we're here to support. How do you involve a CPA or a banker in that projection process?
Having them there on that initial call, so that we can always reference back and say, your trusted advisor, the banker, the CPA, the broker, whoever that may be. If you've got further questions about this, please go to them and let's involve them. We're always going to keep people included on emails as much as we can. We don't ever spam anyone on little piddly things, but we just do want people to be involved and informed. Okay, what's happening with my client? Where's this process going from here? What further information do I need to be thinking about? Because that could stimulate other thoughts. Okay, well, that's working for this client here, but I've got 3 others that are back here that are trying to do the same thing right now. Maybe I should bring them in. Maybe I should have a further conversation from here. One of the other things that I really like about location advisory services as well is we can always be looking at, and again, we're always going to defer to the CPA partner in this, but are there then future opportunities such as cost segregation, such as an R&D study for a particular client? Does that start to make sense now that this new operation is up and running again? It's always something that we want to make sure that we're referring to the CPA on.
One last myth that I want to talk about is that this is only reserved for the big companies. This is when you think of the governor and all the dignitaries lined up in front of the box of dirt with their chrome shovels and their hats and for their photo op. But location advisory, based on our 11 and a half years of doing this, is much more impactful to closely held businesses. Can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, and that's always the thing that's going to make the news, right? The governor's out there. You've got the LinkedIn post that's out there showing everybody, and for the groundbreaking, for the ribbon cutting, and that can always be very exciting, especially for very large name companies, because it's usually the dollars that we're talking about nowadays on economic development projects are just crazy. I mean, it's usually in the billions now. But it doesn't always have to be for your mom and pop shops, for individual single owner operator companies that are out there that are adding 20 jobs. Again, it may not be 20 jobs in the next month. It may not be all at once, but over the next couple of years, if we can get to 20 jobs, that can be really impactful at $5,000 to $10,000 per job that's created out there. Again, it may not be millions of dollars in savings over time, but that's very impactful for those particular companies that are planning on growth and expansion. It shows a healthy company that's out there. We've been able to do it ourselves, and so why not continue to capitalize on that?
No, and I mean, just a little bit of our story. When we bought we did our acquisition in Atlanta back in 2019. We went to the state of Indiana and said, we're all of us are Hoosiers, okay, but Atlanta flies nonstop everywhere, and it can be from a recruiting standpoint, Atlanta could be easier than Indianapolis to get the talent that we desire from McGuire Sponsel. And so we went, and actually your team went on work on our behalf. And what was interesting about that, if I remember correctly, they came back with an offer, but we looked at the offer and it was a good offer, okay, and Bobby will probably accept the offer. But we were able to look at it, the fact that we are Indiana taxpayers, and we're able to switch around some grant money to some credit money to increase the overall value of the deal. my point in bringing this up is one thing that I'm very proud of what the LAS team does within McGuire Sponsel is that we advocate for our clients. We're not going to sit there, and I think that's the unique difference is when you think about talking, we introduce this concept, or we talk about this concept, and some companies say, oh, yeah, I'll do this myself, or my attorney will do that. Nothing against them for doing that, but I don't think they're going to dig very deep. And they're not going to know what really is a good opportunity and what's a really good deal. Is that I think of certain states that have statutory incentives plus the discretionary incentives. And that's where I think, could you walk us through a little bit the importance of the advocacy piece of what we bring to the client relationship?
Well, and I think another element to that is looking up and down the ladder at the various authority levels, state, regional, local, county, city, all those different groups that are out there. And if you don't have someone that's peeling back, my terms, the onion layers that are out there, you're going to miss out on value. And so to have a partner that's in your corner that can help to identify all the opportunities available to you is going to be really important. It's how you maximize your incentives at the end of the day. And you're absolutely right. There may be some low-hanging fruit that's out there. Have we maximized? Have we looked at around every corner, under every rock to make sure that for this client, their success, again, this is a strategic growth conversation that they're having here. They're going to be taking on risk with this new investment, these new jobs. How do we help mitigate that as much as possible for themselves?
Well, Ben, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking time to tune in today. You can subscribe to Let's Talk Tax podcast on YouTube and follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. In addition, today's show notes and links to more about the episode can be found online at McGuireSponsel.com. We'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.